Hello my loving students, welcome to your History Civics class. Today we are going to start a very new chapter, and the name of the chapter is Later Vedic Civilization, and this is your chapter number 3 from Indian history, right? So in this chapter we'll go through the different sources to reconstruct the later Vedic civilization. We'll read about the social, economic and political life, religious life, political life of later Vedic people, later Vedic civilization, right? And after that, we'll have a comparative study between the early Vedic civilization and the later Vedic civilization, right children? So let's begin our class with the very first topic, that is sources to reconstruct later Vedic civilization. So let's start our class. So basically there were two sources. One was literary sources and the second one was archaeological sources, from the study of which we come to know about the later Vedic civilization, later Vedic people. So literary sources means it's a written sources, written materials, right? And archaeological sources means it's like ruins of buildings, ruins of cities, or ruins of towns, or piece of gray pottery, iron tools, weapons, tools, etc. Right? Okay, let's talk about the later Vedic literature. That means the literary sources. Now the later Vedic literature includes Yajurved, Atharvaved and Samved. Each of Vedas consists of two parts, the Samhita and the Brahmana. So each of the Ved or Vedas consists of two parts. One is Samhita and the second one is Purohita. Brahmana. Samhita and Brahmana. The Samhita is comprised of hymns and prayers to be sung at rituals and sacrifices. So hymns, basically the Samhita consisted of hymns and prayers to be sung at rituals and sacrifices. So hymns and prayers sung for God and goddesses, right? And the Brahmanas are prose texts that explain in detail the meaning of those hymns which were written in the Samhita, right? Okay, so Samhita, it's a summary, or it comprised of hymns, and Brahmana where those hymns were explained, right? Okay, next, explained in detail. The Brahmanas are prose texts that explain in detail the meaning of the hymns. Besides, there are Aryanakans, that means forest text also, and the Upanishad, which contain the philosophical thoughts of learned sages on soul, God, and the ultimate truth or reality, right? So beside these Samhita and the Brahmana, there were other two texts. One was the Aryanakas, that means the forest text, and another one was Upanishads, which contain the philosophical thoughts given by these sages on soul, God, and ultimate truth or reality, right? Okay, now let's talk about the second literary sources, that is Smritis and epics. Many other literary productions were handed down in the course of many centuries. Some of these are the Smritis and the two great epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. So Ramayana and Mahabharata were composed in this period, later Vedic age, right? Okay. Now next is archaeological sources. So archaeological sources include the axes made up of iron tools and other iron tools. The later Vedic people were familiar with 4 types of pottery: black, red, black slipped ware, painted grey ware, and red ware. So these were the archaeological sources from the study of which we come to know about the later Vedic age, later Vedic civilization, right? Okay, now spread of Vedic civilizations to many new regions in India. As population increased, the Aryans moved along the course of the river, Sindhu river, right? Course of the river Ganga and Yamuna. The scene shifted from the Punjab to the land of Kurus, which was a region round modern Delhi. So the Aryans who started settling near Saptasindhu river, now they started shifting from that Saptasindhu, from that Ganga Yamuna, along that Ganga Yamuna river, they shifted to Punjab, and from Punjab they shifted to Delhi, and Delhi was earlier known as Kuru, right? So further they occupied vast regions, vast area to the east, such as Kosala, Uttar Pradesh, Kashi, that is Varanasi, Videha, that is North Bihar, and Magad, that is South Bihar, right? The name Vangas, that means Bengal, occurs in one of the Aryanakas, that is forest text. The Etariya Brahmana mentioned the Andhras, that means who in modern times are the Telugu speaking people of the South India. Thus, the territories occupied by the later Vedic Aryans comprise the whole of India to the north of Narmada and some regions even to the south of that river. So from this we come to know that Aryans had shifted from north towards from north to south. That means they occupied the whole India, right? Almost whole India. Now next we have role of iron in later Vedic economy, right? So in I explained you about the copper and bronze, use of copper and bronze in early Vedic civilization, but now iron had been discovered, and the role of iron in later Vedic economy was there, right? Importance was there. So let's see. Axes made of iron made it easier to fell trees and clear forest, or cut branches or cut down the trees. That made more and more land available both for cultivation as well as for colonization, right? Colonization means establishment of settlement, and cultivation means growing of crops. So iron plowshares made deep plowing easily. It helped the peasants to produce varied crops. Carpenters, masons, and metal workers started working with better iron tools. This gave rise to a development of different crafts. So with the use of iron, with the discovery of iron, with the use of iron, people of later Vedic started what? Like people had started cultivations, people started colonization, right? And with the better use of irons, what they started? Carpenters, masons, metal workers started working with better iron tools and better iron implements. And that gave a new horizon, or that gave a new, that gave rise to the development of different crafts. Increased agricultural productivity led to the growth of trade and commerce. This gave a momentum to the rise of towns and cities. With the rise of or with the use of iron tools, with the rise of development of different crafts, what they had started, or what there was a growth of what? Growth of trade and commerce, export and import of items, as well as that export and import of items gave a momentum to the rise of towns and cities, right? Okay, now next is the evidence to suggest that the southern India had also become familiar with iron. So how come we know that the southern Indian region people were aware of iron tools? So there was one evidence, that was a megalithic tomb, right? So megalithic monuments, mega means big, lithic means stones, big stones, right? So megalithic monuments such as dolmens and cromlechs have been found all over South India. That means big stones found all over India. The word megalithic means large stone. Mega means large and lithic means stone. A dolmen or the cromlech is the megalithic tomb with a large flat stone laid on upright ones. Iron tools, arrows, fragments of rice and other grains have been found besides the skeletons of the persons buried in these graves. So this is basically a megalithic tomb which is used to engrave dead bodies, right? So food grains, iron tools, implements, weapons, as well as your arrows, iron tools and other implements were found near that megalithic or megalithic tomb, right? So this is enough to show the transition from copper and bronze age culture to the iron age. So from that iron tools which were found near that megalithic tomb, from that we come to know that that was a transition of transition from copper and bronze to iron age, right? Okay, so let's start a comparative study of early Vedic and later Vedic society. Okay, let's have a comparison in the position of women in early Vedic and later Vedic age. So in early Vedic age, we discussed in the previous video that the position of women were very good, right? So position of women were very good means they were being treated as equal as men in early Vedic period, early Vedic age, right? So women could attend assemblies, women could attend rituals, ritual ceremonies, as well as ritual rites, right? And they could offer sacrifices along with their husbands. So that was the position of women in early Vedic age. But when we come to later Vedic age, we'll see the position of women that is inferior than the position of women in early Vedic age, right? So inferior means in later Vedic age, women were generally given a lower position. Although women continued to be associated with the religious rites, the rules of marriage underwent a change. If monogamy was the ideal, polygamy was also practiced. So what is monogamy? Monogamy means person is having one wife or marrying one wife. So that is having one wife. A person is having one wife. That is monogamy. So this was ideal, but polygamy was also in practice. Polygamy. So polygamy means a person having more than one wife, right? So that is polygamy, and that polygamy was in practice. Okay. Beside these, in the polygamous system, a woman naturally assumes subordinate position. Subordinate means lower position, right? The practice of widows marrying again, which was fairly common in the Rig Vedic age, was now regarded with disfavor. So a widow who could marry again, that was very favorable in this early Vedic age. But in later Vedic age, that system was not favored by the society. So that woman marrying a widow marrying again, that was commonly which was common in early Vedic age, that was regarded with disfavor, right? They were not in the favor of that widow marrying again, right? Okay. Now, but the education which some women received was of high order, and the discourses of women philosophers are preserved in the Upanishads. So whatever the learned scholars or learned women had or learned women philosophers had given, that were preserved or that are preserved in the Upanishads, right? Okay, now, okay, let's talk about the caste system. So in early Vedic period, I told you in early Vedic age, the caste was divided into 4 varnas, and that 4 varnas were Brahmins, Kshatriya, Vaishyas and Shudras, right? And that was so same rules was there, same varnas were there in later Vedic period also, right? But in early Vedic period, that varna system was not very rigid, but in later Vedic period, that caste system or varna system was became very rigid. The later Vedic society was divided into 4 varnas, but the growing cult of sacrifices added much to the power of Brahmins. So the Brahmins, priestly class, became very powerful. Now the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas enjoyed powers and privileges denied to the Vaishyas and Shudras. So the Brahmins and Kshatriya, they were enjoying, and they were having a pleasure time, right? Moreover, many other caste groups besides the 4 major varnas had come into being. In the words of R.C. Rajamdar, we have references to the merchant, the chariot maker, the smith, the carpenter, the tanner, the fisherman, etc. as names of different distinct caste. So beside these 4 varnas, there were other introduction of other subcaste. So those were the chariot makers, smith, carpenters, tanners and fishermen, etc. Right? In the later Vedic age, the membership of the varna or that of caste had become hereditary, right? So which was not seen in this early Vedic civilization. So hereditary means if a person is like a carpenter, right? If a person is carpenter, then his son will also follow the same profession. That means his son will also become the carpenter. So this type of hereditary system become very rigid in this later Vedic age. Now there was also the fixation of occupations in the basis of one's caste, right? The position of Shudras was made miserable by depriving them of rights of learning the sacred text and performing sacrifices. So Shudras' position was very petty because they were considered as untouchables. Shudras, they were like servants, and their position was really miserable because they were not given rights, and they were they were deprived of what? Learning the sacred text, education. They were deprived of education and performing sacrifices also, right? So the so-called untouchables were forced to live in separate settlements outside the village or the town boundaries. So they were considered as, Shudras were considered as untouchables. That means they were supposed to stay out from the village or from the town or village boundaries, right? So their position, Shudras' position was really petty, right? Now the 4 ashrams or stages of life. The man's life was divided into 4 ashrams, and the periods of that was divided in the periods of 25 years each, right? So each period represented 1 ashram, and 1 ashram means 1 to 25 years and 25 to 50 years, like that. So the Brahmacharya ashram was mainly devoted to education for the development of body and mind. So Brahmacharya ashram, the first ashram was Brahmacharya ashram. So Brahmacharya ashram means since birth to 25 years. So that time is for mainly for devotion to or devoted to education for development of body and mind, right? And the Grihastha ashram, that means after 25 to 50. So that period was named as Grihastha ashram, was a period when man get married and led a family life, right? Okay. The Vanaspratha ashram was spent in meditation and prayer. That means from 51 to 75 years. That was termed as Vanaspratha ashram, which man was spent in meditation and prayer. And the last phase of the life, that was Sannyasa ashram. So one had to renounce all worldly pleasures. Renounce means one has to leave all the worldly pleasures and live in the forest as a sannyasi, right? So in this way, they had divided the life, men's life, into 4 ashrams, 4 parts. Clear? Okay, now next we have Gurukul system of education. That means what kind of school they were having. So let's have a look. The Gurukul system of education had become very well established in the later Vedic periods. The pupils stayed with their guru for their physical, mental and spiritual development. That means the students, they had to live with their guru for their physical, mental and spiritual development. Besides Vedic literature, secular subjects were also there, like logic, ethics, mathematics, military, science, law, astronomy, astrology. So these studies, or these syllabus or studies or subjects were included in their course of study. No fees were charged for this type of education, Gurukul system. No fees were charged, but the pupils paid a voluntary contributions known as Guru Dakshina when they completed their education. So children belonging to both rich and poor families had to stay together. They rendered various duties in the running of Gurukul. So to run that Gurukul, what they had to do, they had to do various types of jobs, duties, right? And both rich and the children belong to poor and rich family, they all have to sit together, live together. Okay, they gathered fuel, tended the cattle, begged alms from the neighboring villages and worked in the field attached to the Gurukul, right? So they had to do these type of certain duties, like fuel gathering and begging alms from the neighboring villages and cattle rearing. So these type of jobs they had to do to run the Gurukul. Clear? Okay. So this much for today, children. We'll have a comparative study regarding the administrative setup and political and religious life of the early Vedic and later Vedic people, right? So soon we'll meet in the next video. Till then, bye-bye.